That's James's dinner, and it's sweet kale salad, and made it the sweetness just a little sweeter by adding some strawberries to it. And I brought this out so that I could show you that like the dressing in the sweet kale dressing probably isn't that good for a person, but that's a very popular salad, and it's something we were given for free, and we're given for free on a fairly regular basis. But you can really cut down how much dressing you use by adding something else that's sweet instead. So then you're not consuming refined sugar or whatever is in there. So strawberries work really nicely in the salad. I have found if you make it like half strawberries and half salad, you really don't need any dressing. But that's up to you.
Now, when you were talking about adding something sweet, you weren't meaning the companionship of a little chihuahua called Angel?
Of Angel.
Yeah,
who wants to be out of my shirt for some reason.
She's shivering with cold.
Yeah.
I think it's with fever.
And that's not grape juice, that's purple cabbage juice. So
yeah,
what are
and
you
it's
going to
funny,
talk
when
about
you
today?
drink it and then put water in the remnant,
yeah, it
it's
turns
blue.
blue.
And you can see there's
amazing.
blue around the top
because
here.
I didn't wash dishes. I did wash my bowl this morning, and James has a clean plate, but the glasses are not clean. Well, his water glass is clean. Anyway, what do you have to talk about today?
Aside from Angel here.
She's cold. I got to put her in, but she didn't want to be in my shirt.
She didn't want to be inside
No.
there. She wanted to get out on the expo. These are a couple of books I started reviewing yesterday. And I gave you guys a warning, I think, a day or two before that I'd be reviewing Cien Preguntas Básicas sobre la Ciencia. Translation from English. Something written by Isaac Asimov and Sigmund Freud. Trois essais sur la théorie de la sexualité. 3 essays on the theory of sexuality and presumably science. I'm going to be reviewing a book about the 100 greatest scientists of all time, and it includes Freud, and it includes Plato. Double hot. What is going on here? And it was put out by the Encyclopedia Britannica, who should know better. So we'll have a chuckle, or at least I'll have a chuckle. Maybe you'll understand some of the stuff I'm chuckling about, but the list is incredible. And that there's of course a lot of the cover has Albert Einstein, and he was what a duck says, and that's what we usually apply to doctors. But he was awful. He seems to have been a nice enough guy, but very, very silly, naive. I'm not talking about his politics. I'm talking about his so-called science. I wouldn't even call it pseudoscience. Okay. He was a real hoaxer. They loved a scientist. Freud. Not Freud. Who's this idiot? Asimov. He was involved in going after people that they call hoaxers. People like Velikovsky and a few hoaxers. They love what they think expose frauds, what they see as frauds. Like Velikovsky made all sorts of mistakes, but actually I think line for line, now that I think about it, Velikovsky made fewer mistakes than Einstein. Everything Einstein wrote that I can think of as a crock. Everything. Velikovsky gets some amazing things wrong when it comes to his astronomy, but he's pretty right when it comes to geology. I mean, we live in a catastrophic universe. It's not just a catastrophic modern world with flunkies like the peoples of Ping, who's misleading China and trying to mislead the whole of the rest of the world, and Vlad the Impaler Putin, who's misleading Russia. Wow, they're going to lose if he keeps on doing what he's doing. The Russians are going to lose vast quantities of their empire. Are you listening, you Ruskies? I mean, he might end up causing the world to get blown up. It's hard to say. I think pretty silly. Yeah, the guy's about 70 years old. You know, like he was pretty, had a loose hold on reality up until now. But now I'm afraid he's going the way of much flesh, if not all flesh, is starting to lose its marbles. So yeah, that was. Those are the two things that I'll somewhere along the line I'll be finishing up a review. It might not be today. And yeah, this one, Polish tutor, I started touching on yesterday. Grammar and vocabulary workbook. Unfortunately, you have to work on the vocabulary because there's no real substantial glossary of vocabulary. So it's got a glossary of target vocabulary. Why not just call it a vocabulary? Oh, because it's just a glossary. This is a pretty substantial volume. It's about, what is it, 300 pages? 250? Almost 300 pages. And what have they got for a glossary? 1, 2, not even 3 pages. That won't do. How many words is that? Like 140 words. For a grammar this size and this kind of challenge, you should have probably in your vocabulary roughly 10 times that amount, maybe 1,000 for 1,400 words. For every text in the target language, for example, that every word in from the target language that you use in the text should be found in the vocabulary, in the good vocabulary. Most vocabularies don't live up to that. Almost all of them live up to that, but that's the way it goes. I think they figure, oh, you know, I got to learn how to use a dictionary. You don't want if I were writing a language text, I would not want the obstacles to be that high. I do not like using a dictionary. I got all sorts of language dictionaries, but I don't like using them aside from just plowing through, memorizing, going back and forth. Okay, here's this one word. Where's the dictionary? Flip, 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 flip. Oh, yes, one word. The amount of time you put into that is a huge waste. And people know when they're wasting their time, and they start saying, I just don't want to learn this language. You don't want to make the obstacles any higher, the hurdles any higher than they have to be. So translate. Really, you should translate everything. In an introductory text, this isn't really an introductory. It says that, what is it? Is it this one they're saying it's for? I think it's for I'm going through some Hungarian too. Tagalog. I was working on that this morning. Put me to sleep once, but that's the way it goes. You know, like it's not. It's more the meds that I take than the actual material. I plow through stuff pretty well. I've never run across anyone who plows through languages the way I do. And I've read about very few who be better than me. Maybe Sir Richard Burton, not the actor, but the explorer, 19th century. Not too many people. I managed to plow through this stuff, one way or another. So I'll be dealing with that somewhere along the line. Gave you a little bit of a foretaste of what I'm going to do. And, going from the ridiculous to the sublime, the missing Chums, Hardy Boy books, and something like the original covers. I think some of them are original, some might be red. But, yeah, this is the inside thing that was relatively original. I don't know if it's totally the original, but when was this published? This is one of the first to be published. I'm going to say 1928. Let's see if they actually put it in 1928. So I don't know how many they came up with this format in this series of the format. It was over 40, maybe up into 50 into the 1960s. So I think the first 3 volumes were written by a Canadian. What's his name? Leslie McFarlane. Yep, and his son is Brian McFarlane, who's something like a color commentator on Hockey Night in Canada. He shoots, he scores! And so Leslie McFarlane, I think, came from down east somewhere, maybe the Atlantic provinces. And he was a ghostwriter, because you can see that the writer who's credited with writing the Hardy Boys is Franklin W. Dixon. It's a made-up name. So I think for many of the first, let's say, 20 Hardy Boys that were written or ghostwritten by Leslie McFarlane. I was mentioning, he wrote something like a literary biography, at least of his efforts as the ghostwriter for the Hardy Boys, called The Ghost of the Hardy Boys. So, ghostwriting and stuff like that. I used to just be fascinated by this little thing on the cover here. When I was a kid, I was first introduced to them when Hardy Boys when I was 8 years old. I think about that. Yeah, 8 years old. So it was supposed to be for boys from 10 to 14, but yeah, the Hardy Boys walking through, I presume that's them, walking through this stormy landscape. There's lightning rending the sky. Leaves are getting ripped off trees and things like that. Oh, there's 2 lightning bolts, and these things do happen in the sky. You know, there's all sorts of... if you look up in the sky and get a panoramic view, you'll see the clouds are trying to balance electrical charges up there. So there'll be a bolt going here, and there'll be a bolt off another place, and stuff like that. This basically at the same time. It's pretty impressive sometimes. Anyway, this is, I believe, the 4th in the series. Check that out. 4th in the series. This used to be my favorite type of breed. You know, like there was one in here. The first I ever got was would have been 1962, so older, and it was The Sinister Signpost. And I eventually read that a dozen times. Serious stuff, you know, or I took it seriously. It was actually quite well written. Leslie McFarlane had potentials to be a novelist, and I don't think he was a very good novelist, but I haven't read his real stuff. But he really around, I think that would have been put out somewhere around 1939 or something like that. It was about a foreign called Vilma. Russian kind of name, but he seemed more, when I was a kid, more like a German Nazi. But the one that he followed it up with, I eventually read that 13 times. You know, it kind of crept on. It was too adult for me, really. It starts off with this girl. Well, they're watching. I mean, it's kind of like a convoluted plot. So it starts off with the Hardy Boys watching a movie at the Rialto Theater, and the movie's called A Figure in Hiding, the same thing as the book is called. And while it happens, while they're watching the movie, the money gets taken from the theater. Right? Someone steals it. His name was Nick something, Cardano maybe, or something like that. Kind of an ethnic kind of name, and so on and so forth. I remember it was Nick. And this is a long time ago. And he escapes down a road, and they follow him. You know, they get in their jalopy or car or whatever, and they follow him. It really wasn't a jalopy. I think it was Chet Morton, their fat friend, that had the jalopy. So they follow him, and he gets a little bit on, and they see these lights, you know, and the lights eventually stop. It's nighttime, and they stop, and there's this girl there. They got the wrong car. And her name ends up being Virginia Cinder. And I think the people who assigned the novel assigned it the name Virginia Cinder. So Cinder is like got sin in it, but that's the name of her adopted father. You see how the women who assigned the thing, they were thinking too. So she's a virgin, but she's got Cinder in her family background, adopted family, and he's one who turns out to be one. Spoiler alert! If you're not, he turns out to be one of the criminals that they're tracking down. So that's her father, adopted father. But she's in the car, and you can imagine I was about 9 years old because I got it in Africa. And when we got back, I was 10 years old. I just turned 10. So I was 9 years old. I don't think I was 8 at that point in time. So here's this girl. She's in the car. And she's saying, I want to die. I want to die. And they're on the edge of the, what was it called? Willow River. They've come to right by a bridge, and she's driven off. And she, this is when I started to understand. This was an old book. It's from 1940, because she starts to hammer the car to go in the river. She wants to drown herself. Well, this was it was too mature for me. It was scary. Like someone wants to kill themselves. That's awful. I think it was the first time I'd ever run into the concept of suicide. And so she's just saying, I want to die. And they jump on the floorboards or the running boards on each side and say, what are those? They're the things that they use to step up in the cars, right? I knew, wow, this is like 1962. We're dealing with those big Impalas, Chevrolet Impalas and stuff like that. I knew it was old when I finally figured that out. They were trying to get to the steering wheel on each side and stuff like that. But it was too serious. But what had happened was, you see, it was even more mature, too serious from age 9, and it was supposed to be for kids to age 10 to 14. And what had happened is she'd run across this Nick Cardano on the road, and he tried to get, in the expression of Leslie McFarlane, to get fresh with her. Serious stuff. I'm laughing about it, but it was a little bit over my head when I was reading it at age 9. And so it wasn't my favorite of the Hardy Boys when I first read it, but it ended up, it was amazing, because you see, it was about, again, spoiler alert, it was about a guy called Dr. Grafton. And you see how it was graft, like corrupt. It was amazing. And the thing is, he had there was a lot of it about family, because I believe he was operating in the Sinister signpost. The bad guy had a jockey for a son, even though he's a foreigner, right? Here in the following one, the Dr. Grafton, I can remember the thing. The Hardy Boys are tracking this guy down. He's getting ready to do an operation on an old guy. It'd be like something like cataract surgery, right? Fake cataract surgery. He'd say, I took something out, and he'd get the membrane of an egg. I took something out of your eye. And but what he really took was money from old people, gullible people. So the Hardys are sitting they've set it up with this old guy, and get to witness what actually happens, right? So they're sitting in the closet in this old guy's bedroom, someplace, like presumably his bedroom. And Dr. Grafton is working away on him, and then all of a sudden he stops, and he pulls the shades because he's headed down dark, so the guy can't see what's happening, but it's presumably so it won't hurt his eyes, right? I believe he opens up the shades a little bit and he says, yes, it is he. It's in real life. People would say, yes, it's him. But in proper grammar, yes, it is he. It turns out to be his own father. And he's ripping the money off him. So they bust out of the closet, and he takes off. And again, it's eye imagery. That's what made it so powerful. Eye imagery repeating again. See, figure in hiding. Now, this wasn't given to him by the women. They were the daughters of the guy who developed the corporation. I think the real name was Strattenmeyer, last name. And they were the daughters of the guy who developed the corporation. And they did the Bobbsey twins, Nancy Drew Hardy Boys, any variety of things. Cherry Ames, something or other, nurse, and the Dana sisters, so on and so forth. Leslie McFarlane wrote some of the Dana sisters things. And so they bust out of the closet. He's a fairly good athlete, this Dr. Graffin. He's fairly young, right? And they had the picture on the inside. He's this evil-looking guy. He's busting out in the front lawn. And the Hardy Boys have been laid low by a acrid sort of thing that blinds them. You see how that is? He's throwing some sort of acid, so on and so forth. It's incredible, and how the imagery, the eye imagery, occurs again and again and again. There's one case where they're in a building, like it wouldn't be that high, but they jump out of it, and they land on some on a kind of like not a greenhouse, but something like a greenhouse, a canopy of glass. And of course, your word, they blinded themselves, right? And later on, they confront Grafton. Spoiler alert! In his, of course, so many of the early Hardy Boys, the real mysterious places are out in the countryside, just like here. This front, so they get him. They track him down to his country. It's about vision and being able to see things. See, like people are hiding. He's hiding the fact that he's the son of this old guy. Right? He's doing the operation of hiding. And they get captured. And they're in the basement. There's this huge thunderstorm. And this is not a misrepresentation of the thunderstorm. And there's this thunderstorm going, and he thinks he's killed them. And he's getting ready to bury him in the basement, right? And he's got a deaf mute working for him. So the guy can't talk, but he can see. See the thing? He can see the deaf mute that's working for him. And while Grafton's digging the hole to bury them in, they start stirring. The deaf mute sees it, and he's trying to tell Grafton, and Grafton's a horrible puke. He says, "Shut up, you." He's really abusive. But I think the deaf mute's name is Zeb, and it's incredible. You see how it is. The guy wrote it. He put way too much effort into it, into some of his things. It was absolutely stunning. But this thing, he was just getting going. It's pretty pallid by comparison. So, anyway, sorry about putting you through that, but some of my favorite reading when I was a kid. I never got hold of this when I was a kid. I just got hold of it very much used. Not really that abused. Not like
you used to do to yours, probably.
No.
Did you take good care of them?
My heavens. One of the things that really annoyed me, I used to take these little pictures here, and I'd color them.
Yeah.
And my youngest brother and my youngest sister, when I left home, when I was about 20, I was going, what do I take, what don't I take? And I should have taken my Hardy Boys, because I'd taken really good care of them. And many of these frontispieces, I don't know how many I had I think 20 or something like that. I'd colored them up really carefully with pencil crayon. Like there was one, it was The Mystery of Devil's Paw, where someone in the frontispiece had a lumber jacket, and I'd colored it so it was like the colors crossing each other. Mm-hmm. So blue and red, and then they were purple where they crossed. I was really, really careful. They got hold of them and scribbled them. They did read them, I think, but scribbled on them, lost a lot of them, all that sort of stuff. And when you get about in your 30s, you get a little nostalgic. I think that's because that's when you get kids, and you just kind of start thinking, okay, that's what I was like when I was a kid. so on and so forth. I didn't have kids, but I got nostalgic and I tried to track him down. What happened to him? You know, like, I almost preferred the ones that got lost because
Yeah.
so no respect for their elders, you know. So anyway, yeah, it was. I took this stuff seriously. Now I was reading about Hitler. What is it? Yeah. I'm reading. What is it? It's A Night in Lisbon, and it's written by Erich Remarque. I don't know exactly how to pronounce his name. He's considered one of the more important German writers, I think, of the 20th century. He wrote All Quiet on the Western Front, which is about World War I. And he mentions in there, you know, like it's about beginning of World War II, A Night in Lisbon. And it's they talk about Hitler's favorite reading, which is, I'm going through 3 of the books. Apparently there were maybe 30 to 40 of them in his favorite writers oeuvre, and it was Karl May who wrote stuff for boys, and it was like some of it was about this, like the Arab world, and it featured a horse called Rih, R-I-H, and much of it, maybe most of it, was about the Wild West. And you know, the characters were saying, one character was trying to get in touch with another character over the phone in A Night in Lisbon, but he doesn't want the Nazis to find out he's back in Austria or Germany. And so he's saying, you remember me, something like, you were Old Shatterhand, and this is Winnetou. So Winnetou would be kind of like a native name. You remember when we, I guess they didn't say played cowboys and Indians. Remember when we played Indians, is what he says. And Old Shatterhand is one of the characters that Karl May used. So it had trappers and hunters and Wild West guys and so on and so forth, and these various things. But that was Hitler's favorite reading. And what Remarque says has one of his characters say, you know, like, it had stuff in there that would make a 15-year-old boy who finally reached age 15 smile. Pretty sad. So that's Hitler's favorite reading. Anyway, that's The Missing Chums. And to go from the ridiculous to the sublime, no, I don't know. Anyway, to the even more ridiculous, this book is actually reasonably well written by Theodore H. von Lauer. And I think he was at American University at this point in time. And Why Lenin? A reappraisal of the Russian Revolution, 1900 to 1930. So that's extended, right? So it's even before the first revolution, 1904, 1905, 1900 to 1930. So it's he's figuring that Stalin finished off the revolution, and 1930 would be around the time, 2930, when he was collectivizing, killing off 10 million of his own people, you know, like collectivizing agriculture, and 10 million people in the Ukraine. Yeah, the Russians should be forced to repay reparations. This is like you wouldn't pay pittance, because there's been huge inflation since then. So for every